yo, listen up. Arabica is past its prime, cause this is researching Robusta time. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Researching Robusta with the real Robusta researcher, Rob Bollen. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Robrecht or Rob. I am a Robusta Q grader, currently doing a PhD on the quality of Robusta in DRC, so in Congo. Now my third year, and we've done three intensive samplings in the rainforest of Congo. So we sample different types of Robusta and evaluate the potential and the quality of the Robusta from Congo.
Very exciting for me, especially to learn a bit more about how to cut.
Yeah, I heard this the first time using the standard cupping form.
Well, yes.
Yes. So yeah, this is the fine Robusta cupping form. It's based on the specialty Arabica cupping form with a few changes.
Compared to the
to the Arabica, yes. I think you can find this online as well if the viewers at home want to evaluate the differences. The main differences are that, I'm going to put off the cap on this for a moment, is that we have a salt-acid ratio we have to evaluate and a bitter-sweet ratio. This is different from the Arabica. So in Robusta, we evaluate the ratio of the acidity and the saltness in the coffee as one attribute, and then the bitterness and the sweetness ratio as one attribute.
Okay.
It's quite difficult to do.
In Arabica they're separate attributes.
Yeah. In Arabica you have acidity and you have a attribute for sweetness. So that makes it a bit easier because here we have to take into account the ratio, which takes quite a lot of effort to get used to. If you change from Arabica to the Robusta protocol. The other things are actually quite the same. Here in the Robusta they call it mouthfeel. I think in Arabica it's called the body. But here is the mouthfeel, and the defects and the rest of the attributes are the same. Same as the scores, it's just maximum score out of 10. And if you have a score above 80 or higher, you have fine Robusta, which is equal to specialty.
That's the one we want.
Yeah, we want a fine Robusta, yeah, that's true. So, we'll start off with the dry aroma, which is called the fragrance. So we'll evaluate, we've got 4 samples today. The first one is, if I'm not mistaken, a pulp natural. Then we've got a natural, a washed, and now we have a reference sample, which comes from Vietnam, or imported from Vietnam.
Yes, Francis brought it from...
Yeah. So I already tasted it before. It's a typical Vietnam Robusta coffee, which is a great reference to compare with the other 3 samples. The main setup of today is actually evaluate the impact of processing. So we had it's called the Lula variety, which is all harvested from the same field. We had a big batch of ripe cherries, and then we processed them in different ways. This is what we're going to evaluate in the first 3 samples, and the fourth one is to compare with the market Robusta of today.
So whether it is Arabica or Robusta, basically the processing has most impact on
it's both. It has an impact, of course. The variety or the cultivar you select is of course very important, together with post-harvest processing, pest and disease management, fertilizer. There are so many impacts on the coffee quality, but yeah, processing is a very big one, especially for Arabica. Most Arabicas are washed, which is known to improve the quality. And based on the first test and also other tests from Robusta, it's the same conclusion that if you process your coffee and ferment it, the quality really improves, which is something of course you want. But then for Robusta you have to take into account the extra man hours and investments in equipment and machines compared to the price you can get for it. So for Arabica, if you process it well and the quality really improves, it's worth your time and investment because you get a better price for it.
Okay, but you said washed is the best quality.
Yeah.
So there's also fermentation when you're washing.
Yeah, wash is the term they use for actually fermenting it. So you pulp your coffee, so the bean is pulped out of the cherry, and then it's fermented usually in water, so the microbes can do their thing, and you ferment it. Usually it can be 24 hours, 36 hours, really depends on your fermentation process. So in that time period, there's fermentation going on. We call it the wash process, but actually it means that you have pulped your coffee and then fermented them in water.
Okay, it's so really interesting because I thought like washing that was an immediate process.
No. That's the term they give to fermenting your coffee and then washing it afterwards. Of course, you wash your coffee and then you dry it. If you pulp your coffee directly after harvest, there's also fermentation, but it's dry fermentation because you peel open the cherry skin, the beans come out with the mucilage, which is like full of sugars. You can also ferment it dry, so just leave it out either in the shade, on drying tables, or in the sun.
That's natural then?
That's usually called honey or pulp natural.
Yeah, okay.
Natural is if you dry the entire cherry as a whole. You just harvest it and you dry it in the sun on a concrete patio, on African raised beds. You just dry the coffee bean in the cherry, so as a whole. That's the natural, yeah.
All right.
So you can have a go here at the different samples. I will start with observing the fragrance. Today we've got with us as well as the SCA flavor wheel, which is a nice tool to evaluate descriptors. It's very handy if you want to assist your brain in evaluating what am I smelling here, what am I tasting here. So many times you taste something or you smell something and you can't really place it, and this flavor wheel really helps to jog your memory. Okay, yes, this is indeed chocolatey, this is indeed roasted nuts. So the flavor wheel is a great tool, especially for beginners, to assist your brain in helping to remember what is it that I'm smelling or tasting. So the flavor wheel is a great tool.
All right. I already need to assist my...
That's why it's here.
And this one is roasted a little bit more. I mean,
it's a bit darker. Yeah, that's why we also have the roast level on the protocol. You can indicate if it's a bit more dark roasted.
I would say for me there's a bit of chocolate in this one.
Yeah, that's correct. It's chocolatey and it's also molasses and brown spice. So it would be in this group here, would be in the cocoa group and in the brown spices group.
And here I would pick up rubber. I don't know if that's...
It's possible, maybe there's a defect in the cup. Now there's something here. I think if we evaluate the wet aroma, it will become more clear. Usually if there are defects, they become much more clear in wet aroma, so when you add water to
this
the coffee.
Is a bit more woody for me then?
Woody.
I don't know why.
It's possible.
And this doesn't have that much smell. It's already quite an old sample.
It's quite an older sample, yeah. It's almost becoming stale, so it will be here in the other category group, papery, musty.
And would you pick those kind of stale flavors more easily still in the fragrance, or you have or easier when you've actually prepared the...
So staleness is easy to pick up in aroma, and then defects, especially the clear defects like potato defect, over fermented.
Potato defect.
Yeah, it's very common for African coffees. It tastes like wet potato. It's very clear in the taste. So it really depends. Some defects you can get really from the aroma, and then other defects become really clear once you start tasting the coffee. So it depends on the defect.
So when you say red potato, it's like raw, uncooked potato?
Yeah, that's when like you would lick a potato.
Yeah. Okay, from the outside.
Yeah, you cut open a potato and then you would lick it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to do that experiment at home.
Yeah, if you ever come across a wet potato, a potato defect cup, you'll remember it for the rest of your life. Especially when you taste it, it's really difficult to get that taste out of your mouth. But yeah, maybe we'll come across it one day.
Did you have this experience in Europe or in Congo when you were...
Here in Europe, yeah, multiple times. We did an experiment with processing overripe Robusta. So Robusta sticks to the plant longer compared to Arabica, so the fruit starts to also ferment on the tree. So you can almost pick dark brown cherries as well, and I wanted to see what the impact was. The flavor was more pronounced, but the amount of defects in the cup was much higher. So there was no advantage of picking overripe cherries. Maybe it gives a unique profile, but the amount of defects really increased, which is something you want to avoid, of course. And there we had multiple potato defects over different samples. So it means that potato defects also correlated with black beans or overripe beans, which was interesting.
Okay, black, so when you have a full black, is that from being overripe?
Yes, there are different reasons. They could be from overripe on the tree, it could be from over fermentation in the fermentation process. It could also be like insects have attacked it and then it died and then in the sun it became black.
The berry,
there are different reasonings behind a black bean. So it can be overripe, insect damage, over fermented, fungal damage, maybe fungus attacked it and it became black. So it's not like that a black bean has a potato defect. That's not true. Black beans can have different causes in coffee. This is something researchers are still investigating in detail. But yeah, once you have a black bean in your cup, you will definitely taste it. Yeah.
Nature's full of surprises, of course.
So yeah, normally you would then write down your score here. You get a score. First, you evaluate the dry. This is done by. You can take these if you want.
Well, I can, as you're explaining it, I can already kind of.
Just you start by the first attribute is fragrance aroma, and you can see that there's a dry section. You just indicate it on the level. What quality you would give it. Let's see if I would evaluate this here. I would prefer the first one, but also because it's quite more dark roast. Then the third one is the washed. It's a nice brown sugar aroma. And then the fourth one is, it's because it's old and more stale, very woody, papery. I would give the lowest score. And then afterwards we're gonna combine the dry and the wet aroma into one final score for fragrance and aroma out of 10. And first, of course, I know we're gonna normally you should wait a few minutes
to get to around 92, 93.
Yeah, I think for Robusta, I think it's 95, 94.
That's higher than what
don't quote me on that, but I think it's a bit higher. But yeah, normally you should measure the temperature of the water, and then you just pour your cups very calmly, and then we steep it for 4 minutes. And after 4 minutes, we're gonna break the coffee with a cupping spoon, which is a special spoon for cupping. And during the break, it's important that you really register different aromas and fragrances, because it's the break and the dry aroma that will combine the score of the first attribute, which is fragrance and aroma. So during the break is an important process where you need to focus. You break the crust of the coffee and really evaluate.
You only have one chance to do it. I mean, or if you have 2 cups, I guess.
Yeah, normally standard cupping you have 5 cups.
Per sample.
Per sample, yeah. So depending on how many cuppers you have, Q graders, you can do 1 or 2 cups. I think in quality labs, sometimes just one person doing 5 cups. So you can have multiple chances. But here we can each break 1 coffee and score the first attribute. And then I think at around 8 to 9 minutes we'll start tasting the coffees, and that's the second attribute, which is flavor. We'll evaluate the flavor and the aftertaste together, which is most commonly done because you taste it for flavor and then you also take note of the aftertaste. The aftertaste is quite an important attribute in coffee because it's what sticks in your mouth the longest. If you drink coffee in the morning or in a cafe, it's that aftertaste that really, between each sips, that tastes the longest. If you have a very nice fragrance and aroma, but your aftertaste is really bad, maybe let's say cereally or really dry, that's something you want to avoid in a coffee.
Especially with espresso where you don't have a lot of
indeed. Indeed. So aftertaste is mostly overlooked in coffee, but it's quite an important one because you see it a lot on packaging, like it's fruity flavor or it's red berry fragrance, but not much is mentioned about the aftertaste. It's the long aftertaste, it's the positive aftertaste. I've tasted coffees that had a great aroma and a flavor, but a really dry, astringent aftertaste, which is not something you want in your coffee. And then afterwards, it's a difficult one, is this two ratios, which is salt
Mhm.
acid and bittersweet. So you can see by the vertical axes, you can indicate them individually, and then combining them in a total score for salt acid and then for bittersweet.
Okay, so you do evaluate them separately and
Yeah.
don't think.
Yeah, but it is difficult to evaluate separately, but the vertical bars are there to help you. Yeah, if you have like, oh, this coffee has a nice acidity, you can indicate a higher acidity. But it is, at the end, about the ratio that you will score. And same for bittersweet. So it could be that maybe your coffee is really sweet, which is something you want, of course, but there's also really bitter. Then the ratio takes it into account. That's why this is such a difficult attribute to evaluate these two, because it's the ratio. And then when the coffee is really steeping and being extracted, we go into mouthfeel and balance. So mouthfeel is like the body, and balance is like the balance of the coffee. How do the attributes go all together? And at the end, it's an overall score. Sometimes coffees like to put a little bit of their own opinion into the overall score. It's not always commonly done, but if you really like this coffee, you can give a better overall score, and then you calculate the total score.
Despite everything that you did step by step.
Yeah. It's not commonly, but some coffees like to really, if they prefer a coffee, they give it a higher overall score compared to the others, to really like indicate, look, this is good coffee, despite maybe some other things we noticed in the coffee itself. Alright, I think you can pour if you want.
Well, maybe you start showing your pouring technique. Of course, you don't have a goose.
If you have a timer where you can start by timing it to 4 minutes.
Yes, alright. And then we go 3, 2, and 1. So, to give a bit of explanation, you instructed me to put 8.8 grams.
Yeah, the standard ratio for the Robusta protocol is 8.75 grams of ground coffee for 150 milliliters of water. Water is important in cupping as well, so don't try to use tap water, because usually it's really hard, there's a lot of calcium in it. There are guidelines for water for evaluating coffee, but if you are just a hobbyist or beginner, just using bottled water is always a nice starting point.
But you should check the hardness of your bottled water.
Yeah, there's a lot of variation. In the store, you prefer to use those bottled waters which have very low total dissolved solids, or ppm. It's usually they have to mention it on the bottle. You can just look and compare in the supermarket between the total dissolved solids or the ppm on the bottle itself.
Okay.
You want to be somewhere between 140, 150 ppm, but just keep it low. Don't go for those waters that have like 400 or 800 ppms, because then the water becomes hard, and then it feels like your coffee is also hard, so more salty, more bitter. So you want to have a good ratio of solids in your water.
As you were pouring, we heard this cracking sound.
Yeah, I don't know what there was twice here. I've never heard it. I think it's maybe because of these new cupping cups I bought. I think it's because of the plastic. Because it's the first time ever that I hear a cracking sound. So I think it's just because of the plastic.
I'm always on the outlook for cracking.
Yeah,
I'm watching the coffee, so
it's nothing to do. I think with the coffee, it's just the plastic. Evaluate your aromas.
Already as a
you can already start learning some things. If you note something, you can write it down. This is not a braid, this is just a wet aroma, but you can learn a lot from just smelling the coffee now.
Might be biased, but I still have the chocolate there. And
That's good. Chocolate is very positive. Yeah, this is chocolate tea and brown spice. So it's the level 2 of the flavor wheel would then here be brown spice and cocoa.
Oh well, here I think I said woody, but it's there's some recognition, and yet I'm not able to.
Yeah.
Maybe bready. No.
You hear I think maybe you're right. The first cup there's maybe little defects. We'll taste it. But the second cup is very nice, and that's mostly in the brown sugar group. So that would be in the brown sugar group, and also a bit cocoa. And then the fourth one is it's getting stale and old coffee. It is cereal woody. It's the typical Robusta, low quality. processed. Yeah. So
That's
the fourth one.
not what you want to drink.
So the fourth, I think we're in consensus that the fourth one has a very woody cereal wet aroma, which is not preferred. I like the first one, and then I like this, the washed one, the second cup. I think maybe in the first cup there's a defect, we'll taste it, but I like the second one because it's really sweet. So it has,
This has a bit of the cereal. Maybe.
Yeah. And this is really the brown sugar group.
That's maybe something. Let's check. We're actually already 3 minutes 30. That's something you explained to me earlier. Sometimes in the beans, in the processing, you have this kind of how did you call it? Grey ones, where you still have a bit of the.
So it's silver skin.
Silver skin.
Yeah. It gives a cereal flavor. Yeah.
So that's because the pulp didn't release fully. Or?
Yeah, that's just normally because this is all experimental coffee. Normally you would polish the coffee, meaning you remove the silver skin.
And how do you polish it?
It's a machine that grinds beans to a surface, and then the silver skin is removed. So in a commercial coffee you would not find the silver skin. But the silver skin indeed, which is like a protective layer around the seed, once it's roasted, it gives a bit of a cereal flavor. Normally we try to clean the sample as good as possible, but sometimes there's some silver skin present. But it shouldn't be that negatively on impacting the coffee. But yeah, the silver skin is known to give like cereal flavors. I think it's time for us to break. Yeah, you can break. So you can. It's really quite simple. You just take your cupping spoon and you just gently break the crust 3 times, and you evaluate the aroma.
3 times.
Yeah. You can do this here as well. Then we're gonna get some cleaning water. So you can clean your spoon in between cups.
Wow, you have to think fast as you're doing this.
Yeah. But that's just experience. Once you do it a lot, you know what you have to pay attention to. So this is almost entirely the brown spice group. So it's really a lot of brown spices. Also a bit peppery, which is nice.
The peppery,
yeah, which is nice. It's nice. So it's typical. As you can see, peppery is adjacent to the brown spice, so we're in this category here, which is good for a Robusta coffee.
It's too quick. I need a lot more practice.
You can be a bit more aggressive if you want. You can really like break the crust and smell it.
So does it ever happen that you end with your nose in?
If you don't pay attention, you'll end up with your nose in the coffee and you'll have a burned nose. Yeah, that's okay. The second one, the natural.
Oh wow, this has like actually I broke the syrupy one. But it was so sweet.
Yeah, that's why I said syrupy, yeah.
Syrupy, yes, syrupy.
That's correct, yeah, so it's really, like I said, in the brown sugar group.
Yeah, and that syrupy brown sugar.
Very nice, that's what you want. It's a washed coffee. It's what you want in a coffee, sweetness and syrupy. I'll try with this one.
Yeah, and here it's a little bit, the tobacco or the...
tobacco leathery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just really getting stale and old now. It's typical. This is typical smell for stale coffee. Yeah. So then what we then do is we clean the cups. You can give me your spoon.
Alright. Because you need the 2 spoons to.
Yeah, it's just easy. You clean up the foam and the particles that float, and you remove them from the coffee, so it's easier to taste. Of course.
Where is a good place to buy the spoons? I've been on the lookout for it, but
I think in a coffee shop, like in a specialty coffee shop, or maybe just online. I think online they provide a whole range of quality and prices of cupping spoons.
And is there anything you need to pay attention for when you're...
I think it's just that's a sufficient amount of volume in it. So my first spoons I bought were actually too small. I couldn't really take a lot of coffee onto the spoon, which is something you want, of course. You won't be able to evaluate a sufficient amount of volume each time you taste the coffee. And if you want just a final round of just smelling the coffees,
after
and maybe tell me which one you prefer the most.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely the one there with the syrupy. Although it was kind of funny, as I was stooping down, I thought I was already at the one.
Yeah.
Here, which is kind of also agreeable. So I would say this is my number 1, this is my number 2, and
Yeah.
it's really quite a variance between between the coffees.
So this is actually, so remember the first 3 samples are all coming from the same harvested coffees, all the same variety. So here you can really smell, and now we're going to taste the difference of processing. So this is just drying your coffee in the cherry, and this is pulping and fermenting and then drying them.
Yes.
So you can see what the impact is on the flavor already.
This was the washing.
The washed, yeah.
And they all grew at the same time.
Yeah, they were all harvested at the same moment. It's all the same day actually. So we had 15 people harvesting the entire day, and then we processed the coffees at the same moment. So they all had the same amount of sun, it's the same amount of drying periods. So they had the same climate. So now we can evaluate the impact of processing. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah, and then of course now I think it's going to be a bit hard, but I'll evaluate. This is the most difficult part for beginners is cupping it. So it means you have to take a sufficient amount of coffee on your spoon and slurp it, which means you combine the coffee with as much air as possible. You create a kind of aerosol. This way you can get a lot of aromas into the back of your mouth through your nose, and this way you can evaluate more intensely and better the fragrances and the aromas that you taste in the coffee. If you just drink a coffee, that's perfectly fine, but if you really slurp it up with air, then you can get more of those aromas to the back of your mouth and also to your nose. Yeah. It's called retronasal, which is a great tool to really evaluate the quality of the coffee. But if you've never done this before, just drink the coffee, it's perfectly fine. You just take an amount and then you slurp it. I'm not sure how hot this is going to be, so I'm going to evaluate. That's perfect.
And then you have a bit of...
Yeah, you swirl around a little bit, and you. For now, we're going to take notice of the flavor and the aftertaste, not the ratios, just the flavor and the aftertaste. Try to describe what you taste on flavor, if you like it or not, and especially pay attention to the aftertaste. How does it taste in the mouth, and how long does it linger? You can be more aggressive if you want. You're not hurting anyone by slurping really loud. Maybe just the ear, but.
Oh, I was trying my best. Yeah, this first one, taste-wise, wasn't really that. Also,
it's a bit darker. So it's a bit darker. So you're coming more into the burnt category group. So that means you're coming more towards brown roast and a bit smoky.
Yeah, smoky.
But not. I mean, I like it, but it's clearly more dark roast than the other 2 samples.
A bit stringent and the aftertaste.
Yeah, a bit dry, but not that much. Yeah, you can put a little time. So the second one, the natural, is actually quite dry and cereally.
The second one here.
Yeah.
That was the one where we suspected defects, right?
No, that would be the third one. It would be, I think, this one.
Yeah, that was this one. Hey, you really do it in like one.
Yeah, don't hesitate. Just really slurp it up.
But so, do you put your lips already
at the edge of the spoon?
Yeah. Before you do the.
Yeah, at the edge of the spoon, make the entrance to your mouth really small and just really inhale.
Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, the fourth one is stale old, but also it's typical Robusta flavor. So the fourth one is tobacco and cereally, and because of the staleness, very woody and papery. So how are you liking the first 2 ones?
Well, yeah, so the fragrance I really liked of those first, like chocolatey, but then in the tasting, that's was too bitter.
But of course, I think you are used to tasting Arabicas, no?
Yeah.
Mostly?
Yeah.
So the main thing for you, I think, is that the lack of acidity you have.
Yeah.
They're not very bright coffees because of the Robusta variety. Species, sorry.
But I did an espresso with this earlier today.
Yeah,
it
this
was
is
really
perfect
nice.
for espresso.
It was really nice.
You can taste these typical espresso notes like brown spices, chocolatey, which is, I think, translates really nice into an espresso, especially even darker roast.
And this is just yuck at this point. This stale.
Yeah, but even when I tasted it fresh a couple of weeks ago, it was typical Robusta flavor, which I don't like. But it's nice to see that, I mean, these are all Robustas. What you can do, especially here with the third sample, the washed one, if you process it correctly and you select a good variety, you can really do a lot of good things for Robusta. If you compare the third sample with the fourth one, there's a world of difference.
Yeah, there's no comparison, it's just so...
So the first sample of the wash here is not a defect, but there's something different here. But I would not label this as a defect. The second cup is indeed better tasting, but the first one is not a defect.
So here, this one in the smell and the fragrance is a lot syrupy. Then in the tasting, that of course is a lot less. I guess even with Arabicas that would be similar. That's the mechanism, because it's not the taste buds on your tongue, of course. When you're doing that, it is. And that's able to pick up sweetness.
Yeah, so your brains are correlating the smells with the taste of the product. So let's say if you smell syrup, you would think it's sweet. If you smell chocolate, you would think it's sweet. So your brain is associating these aromas with the taste of that food associated with it. So that's why when we smelled the third sample, we were like, oh, this is going to be really sweet. It is of course more sweet than sample 1, 2 and 4. But you would expect it to taste more sweet just because of the aromas. And of course the coffees, I've tasted coffees that are actually really sweet. This is not the case here, of course, but it's a really nice coffee. But I think as someone who's never tasted washed Robusta, you would think it would taste more sweet. But it's a really nice coffee,
Yeah, this is very interesting. So at this point, you would have already started kind of writing it down.
Yeah, of course, write everything down. I think for now, for the first time, it's really already a good starting point. Let's not move into the ratios, it's very difficult. Maybe I'll ask you, like, based on the fourth sample, which one has the most pleasant mouthfeel, most pleasant body? So which one would you like, if you swirl it in your mouth, prefer?
Do a... without doing the... Just more...
No, both, you can slurp it up. But afterwards, if you swirl it around in your mouth, which one do you prefer?
Is that similar to how you would evaluate wine when you're just...
I don't really have experience with wine, but I think they would do something similar, yeah. But wine is quite different because of the glycerins and the alcohol, but I think they also like really swirled around in the mouth. I think you can notice with Robusta as well as a Robusta coffee, same for Arabica, but especially Robusta, it really changes a lot in time. So when it cools down, the flavors you had in the beginning are now quite different than we have them now, especially here in this one, in this double fermented pulp natural.
Getting softer.
Yeah.
Even the one here with the defects are getting less, actually. Let's see now. Somehow, this one is my favorite. And like the whole combination.
But it's a natural Robusta. It's clean, it's very clean coffee. For this one I'm missing a bit of the wininess and the mouthfeel. So natural coffees are, especially for Robusta, associated here with the wininess. Because of the fermentation inside the cherry. So natural coffees tend to have more of a wininess, which I like in the coffee. But here it's a bit lacking, maybe I think because of the fast drying process. We had really good and intense sunshine during processing, so I think maybe here in this case the cherries dried too fast.
And then there's no
there weren't
time
really
for-
allowed time for fermentation within the cherry. But normally, previous years, the naturals really had a nice wininess to them, which I as a cupper really like in a coffee. And here it's a bit lacking. It's a clean natural coffee, but it's below its potential, I would say. Yeah. This first one is really nice, especially the mouthfeel. It's a bit more dark roast, which is nice here. I think this would be really good in espresso.
Yeah.
And I really like the brown spices here. Intense brown spice flavor and also taste. My favorite is the washed here because of the brown sugary and the sweetness. And then the fourth one is just a reference. This is no way near.
But between the two, did you still observe?
Yeah, there's a bit of difference, but I would not label it. I would maybe label it as uniformity, is that they are not uniform, the cups. But it's all right. Second cup is a bit sweeter and has more of the brown sugary descriptors, but it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, the brown sugar. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I mean, both of them I do enjoy.
Yeah.
So this is super interesting. Thanks for this workshop.
You're welcome.
We can keep tasting, but I'll round up the video. So keep on the good work, Rob, and maybe we'll learn more.
Well, more coppings will follow. Still doing processing experiments, so in the future we'll definitely cup some more coffees.
Perfect. See you next time.